uh, about September 2000, I was invited to become the first correspondent to report from the Titanic. I had a deathly fear of water, but being a correspondent, you don't say no to an invitation like that. So I went. We left Halifax, Canada, went on station above the Titanic, then dove in there, 2.5 miles down to the bottom of the Titanic. And as your viewers may or may not know, when the Titanic sank, it broke into two pieces. The bow section went straight down. The stern did a somersault. And so it exposed, when it landed on the bottom, it exposed the propeller. So when we toured the bow, there was no problem. There was a moment of silence we had just for the sake of the victims there. It's all very somber, very haunting. And then as we traversed the debris field over towards where the stern section had landed, the first thing that caught my eye was the giant propeller. And when I say giant, it's huge compared to our sub. Our sub was like a little mosquito compared to the blades of the propeller. But I remarked to myself how shiny it was because it's got brass, and so it doesn't corrode the way the rest of the Titanic has. And as that happened, as I was just dazzled by this giant propeller, I noticed we were speeding up, and that seemed strange to me. I thought we should be slowing down. And we later found out that we got caught up in a very high-speed underwater current. Those do exist down there. We got slammed right into the blades of the propeller, became trapped behind the blades of the propeller. And not only did we feel the collision, but also huge pieces of the Titanic started falling down on us, and we knew we were in trouble.
Wow. Trapped behind the propeller. How did you manage to get yourselves out?
Well, it's when you were down there, my first concern was panic. Would there be anybody, the pilot or my diving buddy, would they panic? Because we'd been told a story on board the ship before we dove of a man who was caught in a similar situation and in his panic went to the escape hatch thinking he would go out that way. He wasn't thinking, obviously, and of course expedited his doom. The pressures down there, if the water, even through a little crack, comes through, it'll cut you like a razor blade. So I, being a scientist, started thinking, okay, I'm a professional problem solver. We're stuck 2.5 miles below the surface of the water. How do we get out? And it took me the better part of a half hour or more as our pilot tried to jog us out and he wasn't succeeding. I finally really hit a brick wall and realized, no, this is the end of it. And this voice in my head actually said to me, and I'll never forget the words, this is how it's going to end for you. And for me as a correspondent who'd been to the North Pole, the South Pole, I'd covered Persian Gulf War and other places where I was in harm's way, always managed to survive it. For me, that was a bitter pill to swallow. I thought of my wife, I'd never see her again. So I don't like recalling that experience. I was fortunate enough by the grace of God and by the skill of our pilot, who was a former MiG pilot. This was a Russian sub. He was able to finally extricate us after the better part of an hour. But then even when we got out, it was a question of getting to the surface, and you corkscrew the surface. It takes about 2.5 hours more. So it's an experience that I'll never forget in my life. And my heart goes out to these people who are lost. I'm just so sick to my stomach to think of those poor people down there. You know what it's like.